Friday night, I stood in the Norcrest Dynamics glass elevator, my cheek purple from my stepmother's bracelet. "No one will believe you," she whispered, shoving me into the corner, not knowing the ceiling camera was running. The next morning, my rich grandfather saw the footage. He told his lawyer, "Freeze, everything." By afternoon, their accounts were locked, and I walked into the 42nd floor boardroom with a USB drive. My name is Ava Mercer. I am 28 years old, and I am the analytics team lead at Norcrest Dynamics. The city of Grayford was a grid of cold light outside the floor-to-ceiling windows of the 38th floor. It was 9:42 p.m. on a Friday, and the only sounds were the persistent hum of the server room down the hall and the rhythmic tapping of my own keyboard. I was late, again, buried in spreadsheets that didn't add up. The numbers were off, skewed just enough to be blamed on a clerical error, but consistently, dangerously, skewed in favor of the same three vendors. Vendors I'd never heard of before my stepmother, Vivian Mercer, had been appointed acting chief operating officer. I hit save on a file named Vellum Sourcing Discrepancy Q3 and locked my workstation. The fatigue was a heavy blanket, but underneath it, a cold wire of adrenaline was thrumming. I knew what I was looking at. I just didn't know what to do with it. The lobby was a vast, 3-story atrium of glass and steel. Designed to impress, to intimidate, tonight, it was empty, a sterile canyon of polished granite. The silence was absolute. I walked toward the main elevator bank, my heels clicking a sharp, lonely rhythm on the floor. I pressed the call button. The polished brass doors slid open with a soft, expensive sigh. She was already inside. Vivian Mercer stood in the back of the elevator, perfectly still, as if she had been waiting. She wasn't in her usual sharp, corporate attire. She wore a dark cashmere coat, and her blonde hair was pulled back, making her features seem sharper, harder. The warm, musky scent of her perfume filled the small space, a cloying, invasive smell. "Working late, Ava," she stated. It wasn't a question. "Just wrapping up the quarterly projections," I said, my voice carefully neutral. I stepped inside and pressed the button for the parking garage. The doors slid shut, encasing us in the glass box. The elevator began its silent descent, the lights of the lobby falling away, replaced by the dark steel of the structural supports. "I saw your queries," Vivian said, her voice dropping to a low, cold monotone. "The ones to accounting, about Vellum." My stomach tightened. "I'm just cross-referencing vendor invoices against the new budget codes. Standard procedure." The elevator stopped. The doors didn't open. She had hit the emergency stop button. The red light of the alarm bell housing cast a sickly pulse on the walls. "You're not stupid, Ava. So don't be naive," she hissed, taking a step toward me. "You're a data analyst. Analyze this. Stay out of the ledgers." She was close now. I could see the fine lines around her eyes, the tension in her jaw. "Vivian," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "I have a fiduciary duty to report irregularities. If you'll excuse me." I reached for the door open button. She moved faster than I could have imagined. Her hand shot out and gripped my hair, yanking my head back with a sharp, blinding pain. My scalp screamed. Before I could even cry out, her other hand came across my face. It wasn't just a slap, it was a strike, deliberate and brutal. What made it worse was the hardware. She wore a heavy, gaudy gold link bracelet, a gift from my father. The metal links made contact before her palm did, right on the high point of my cheekbone. The sound was shockingly loud in the confined space, a sharp, distinct keng. It sounded like a crystal glass shattering. The force snapped my head to the side. A universe of white-hot, electric pain exploded from my cheek, radiating up into my temple and down into my jaw. My eyes watered instantly, blurring the sterile light of the elevator into a painful halo. A hot metallic taste filled my mouth. "You will keep your mouth shut," she whispered, her face inches from mine, her grip still tangled in my hair. "You will forget Vellum, You will forget this. You are a guest in this company, a guest in this family. Do you understand me? I couldn't speak. I just whimpered, the sound pathetic even to my own ears. The humiliation was a separate, burning poison, hotter than the pain. She shoved me. I stumbled backward, hitting the glass wall of the elevator with a dull thud. I slid down into the corner, pulling my knees up, my hand pressed to my throbbing face. I was shaking, not from fear, but from a profound, seismic rage that was so deep it was almost silent. I looked up, my vision clearing, my breath coming in short, ragged gasps. I was looking for anything, an escape, a weapon. And I saw it. Tucked in the chrome ceiling panel, almost invisible unless you were looking for it, a small black dome, no bigger than a golf ball, and in its center, a single, unwavering, pinprick of red light. The camera, it was running, it was recording, it was a cold, objective, digital witness to every second. Vivian hadn't seen it. She was busy smoothing her cashmere coat, adjusting her cuffs. She looked down at me, huddled in the corner, with an expression of pure, reptilian disgust. She pressed the button, and the elevator resumed its descent. The red light stayed on. The ding of the elevator arriving at the lobby level was the loudest sound I had ever heard. The doors slid open. A security guard, Peters, was standing right there, his hand halfway to his radio. He must have been alerted by the emergency stop. His eyes went wide. He saw me on the floor, my hand over my face. He saw Vivian, standing tall and composed. Vivian's transformation was instantaneous, a masterpiece of corporate theater. Her face melted into a mask of maternal concern. "Oh, thank goodness! Mr. Peters!" she gasped, her voice syrupy and panicked. "She just collapsed. I think she tripped. She's been working so hard. Poor thing. Ava, darling, are you all right?" She bent down, reaching for me. I flinched, scrambling away from her touch. "Don't touch me!" I spat. I used the railing to pull myself to my feet. The lobby tilted. Peters looked from my face, which I could feel was already starting to swell, to Vivian, the acting COO, his boss. "Ma'am, Mrs. Mercer." Peters stammered. He was a man on an hourly wage, suddenly thrust into a war he didn't understand. He wouldn't make eye contact with me. "I am fine," I said. My voice was a low, shaking thing. "Peters, I want to file an incident report, right now." His face went pale. "An incident report? Miss Mercer? But Mrs. Mercer said you fell." "I didn't fall," I said, locking eyes with him. "I was assaulted. By her." I pointed at Vivian. The silence in the lobby was suffocating. Vivian let out a small, theatrical laugh. "Oh, Ava, you're delirious. You hit your head. Peters, please call my driver. We need to get her to a doctor. She's clearly overwrought." She was already creating the narrative, hysterical, overworked, confused. Peters looked desperate. "Miss Mercer, maybe we should go to the 24-hour nurses station first. We can talk about the report after you've been seen." He was deflecting. He was terrified. He wasn't going to write the report. Not against her. I looked from his cowardly face to Vivian's smug, concerned mask. I knew I was alone. There would be no help here. "Fine," I said. I pulled my coat tight around me, my hand still pressed to my cheek. The pain was a dull, heavy throb now. I started walking, pushing past both of them. My stride was uneven, but I refused to run. The click-clack of my heels echoed on the granite, a sound of retreat. "Ava, don't be dramatic," Vivian called after me, her voice laced with false concern. I didn't look back. I pushed through the heavy glass doors and into the cold Grayford night. The wind hit my face and made the fresh injury sting, but it also cleared my head. I flagged a cab, my hand trembling. The second I was inside, the door slammed shut, and I was safe in the anonymous darkness of the back seat. I pulled out my phone. My fingers were clumsy, shaking so badly I kept hitting the wrong keys. "To security at Norcrest. Subject, urgent. Incident report and footage preservation. Lobby elevator bank. C. 9:47 p.m. Body. This is a formal request for the preservation of all security footage from lobby elevator bank C and all surrounding lobby-level cameras from 9:40 p.m. to 9:50 p.m. Friday, October 24th. I, Ava Mercer, was assaulted by acting COO Vivian Mercer in the elevator. I am requesting an unedited, time-stamped copy of all relevant files. Do not delete this footage. I hit send before I could second-guess the bluntness, before the fear could talk me out of it. A moment later, an automated reply flashed on my screen. Your request, Ticket 4471, has been received and logged. Ticket 4471. It was real. It was in the system, a digital breadcrumb they couldn't erase without a trail. The cab dropped me at my apartment. I fumbled with the key, my hands still shaking. Inside, I threw my keys onto the counter, the sound skittering across the quartz. I didn't turn on the lights. I walked straight to the freezer and pulled out a bag of frozen peas, pressing it to my face with a sharp, involuntary hiss. The cold was a shock, but a grounding one. I sat in the dark kitchen, the city lights painting patterns on the floor. I looked at my reflection in the black window. A distorted, swollen-faced stranger looked back. I pulled up my phone. My thumb hovered over my father's name. I bypassed it. He would believe Vivian. He always did. I scrolled down to D. Harlan DuPont, my grandfather, my mother's father, the man who had built the empire Norcrest was a part of, the man who funded the entire family trust, the man who had despised Vivian from the day my father brought her home. The phone rang twice, the sound loud in the silence. Ava. His voice was gravel, dry and old. Even at this hour, he never said hello. I didn't cry. I would not be a victim on this call. My voice was flat, cold, a perfect echo of the security camera's lens. Harlan, Vivian assaulted me in the lobby at Norcrest, about 30 minutes ago. Silence. She hit me in the face, with her bracelet. More silence. I could hear the faint, steady tick-tock of the massive clock in his study. I have a witness, I continued, my voice gaining strength. A digital one. The ceiling camera in elevator bank C. It recorded everything. I've already filed a formal security ticket to preserve the footage. The line was quiet for what felt like an eternity. A full 30 seconds passed. He wasn't in shock. He was processing. He was calculating. He was moving chess pieces on a board I couldn't even see. Finally, he spoke. His voice was unchanged, still that dry rasp, but there was a new, cold edge to it, a finality. Come to the mansion tomorrow morning. He paused. 10 o'clock. Another pause. And Ava, bring your self-respect. Click. He hung up. I lowered the phone, the bag of peas dripping icy water onto my shirt. Bring your self-respect. It wasn't a question of if I was okay. It wasn't an offer of comfort. It was a command. He was ordering me to bring the one thing he had endowed me with, the one thing Vivian had just tried to beat out of me. I looked at my swollen reflection in the dark glass. The bridge was gone. The pretense of family. The fragile corporate peace. It had all been incinerated in the king of that gold bracelet. I nodded, alone in my kitchen. Tomorrow. I wasn't just bringing my self-respect. I was bringing the evidence. I was bringing the war. The DuPont mansion was not a home. It was a fortress of old money, perched on a hill overlooking the smoggy, ambitious sprawl of Grayford. The gates opened with a silent, heavy groan. As my taxi crunched up the long, winding drive, I watched the city disappear behind a meticulously curated forest of oak and pine. It was 9:51 a.m. The sky was a flat, unforgiving gray. I had spent the night alternating between a bag of frozen corn and staring at the automated Ticket 4471 email. Sleep had been impossible. The pain in my cheek had subsided to a deep, resonant ache, a purple-black constellation that spread from my cheekbone to my temple. I hadn't bothered to cover it with makeup. Self-respect. Harlan had said. This bruise was part of it. The heavy carved oak doors of the entryway were opened by Reeves. the butler, who had been old when my mother was young. He didn't flinch, didn't gasp, didn't offer a sympathetic glance at my face. His professionalism was its own form of armor. "Miss Mercer," he said, his voice a low rumble. "Mr. DuPont is expecting you in the library." I followed him across the cavernous main hall. The air inside the mansion was different. Dry, warm, and smelling powerfully of walnut polish, old leather, and something faint and floral that I associated with my long-dead grandmother. My heels, which had clicked so sharply on the granite of Norcrest, were silenced by thick, antique Persian rugs. The walls were lined not with art, but with achievements, framed blueprints of factories, maps of old trade routes, and massive, dark oil paintings of DuPont merchant vessels crashing through stormy seas. The library was a 2-story room walled in dark wood, the only light coming from green-shaded bankers' lamps. Harlan DuPont was not sitting. He was standing by the massive, unlit fireplace, his back to me, staring up at a painting of a clipper ship. He was a tall, thin man, made thinner by age, but he stood with a ramrod-straight posture that defied his 80-plus years. He wore a gray wool suit that looked like it had been tailored in 1970 and had been perfectly maintained ever since. He didn't turn around. "Reeves, coffee, for both of us, and bring Marla." "Mrs. Keene is already here, sir. She's waiting in the study," Reeves murmured, and dissolved back into the hallway. Only then did Harlan turn. He was wearing his reading glasses, which he removed slowly, folding them with a precise click. He placed them on the massive partner's desk that dominated the room. His eyes, a pale, icy blue, the same as my mother's, drifted from my eyes to the bruise on my cheek, then back to my eyes. He held the gaze for 3 full seconds. There was no pity. There was only assessment. "You have proof," he said. It was not a question. "I do," I replied. My voice was hoarse, but it didn't shake. "The primary evidence is digital." "List it." "On the ceiling-mounted security camera in elevator bank C. It's a high-definition, wide-angle lens. It would have captured the entire interaction, from her hitting the emergency stop to the strike. I filed a preservation ticket with security last night, so there is a log of my request." Harlan nodded, a short, sharp dip of his chin. "Good. The ticket prevents Keller from claiming accidental deletion. What else?" 2. The lobby cameras. They would have recorded her manufactured concern and my explicit denial of her story to the guard. Peters, it establishes her immediate intent to create a false narrative. "Corroboration?" he grunted. "Anything else?" "Yes, this." I held up my left wrist, tapping the dark screen of my smartwatch. "My personal health and safety app. It's set to begin a silent audio recording if my heart rate spikes above 150 beats per minute while I am stationary, and I don't enter a safe passcode within 10 seconds. It triggered the moment she grabbed my hair. It recorded her voice, her threat, and the sound of the impact. A woman cleared her throat from the doorway. And that audio, Miss Mercer, is admissible in this state with one-party consent, which you, as the wearer, provide." Marla Keene stepped into the room. She was Harlan's personal lawyer, a woman in her 50s with razor-sharp gray hair and a suit that probably cost more than my car. She was the legal architect of the DuPont Family Trust, and she carried a thick, leather-bound portfolio. She looked at my face, and unlike Harlan, her eyes narrowed. It wasn't sympathy, it was anger, but a cold, weaponized anger. "Harlan," she said, nodding to him, then to me. "Ava, this is unfortunate and actionable." Harlan gestured to the portfolio. "The compact, Marla, read the relevant clause." Marla opened the heavy binder on the desk. This was the DuPont Family Governance Compact, the quasi-legal, ironclad document that governed every dollar, every share, and every beneficiary of the family fortune. She ran a finger down a page. Clause 14, Section B. On beneficiary conduct, I quote, any designated beneficiary of the DuPont Family Trust, or any spouse thereof, found to have engaged in willful financial malfeasance, fraud, or acts of physical violence against another family member or employee of a DuPont-held entity, shall have their access to all trust-held assets, accounts, and lines of credit immediately and unilaterally suspended by the trustee, pending a full internal review. She looked up, her expression flat. The acting trustee is Harlan DuPont. The spouse is Vivian Mercer. The act of physical violence is self-evident. She's been stealing, I said, the words coming out faster than I intended. That's why she did it. I was tracing irregularities in the vendor ledgers. Vellum sourcing. It's a shell. I'm sure of it. She was afraid I'd found the link. Marla and Harlan exchanged a look. Violence to cover fraud, Harlan said. She has violated both triggers of 14B. Marla, draft the order. Already drafted, Marla said, pulling a sheaf of papers from her briefcase. It's a temporary, 60-day freeze, authorized by you as trustee. It covers all accounts held in the name of Vivian Mercer. It also extends, per the Asset Protection Subclause, to her known dependents and potential transfer recipients. Her children, I clarified, Miles and Chloe Rook, her 2 adult children from her first marriage. Miles was an incompetent yes-man Vivian had installed as a temp CFO at Norcrest. Precisely, Marla said. We cannot have her moving assets to them in anticipation of the freeze. This order will lock her salary account, her brokerage accounts, the joint checking account she holds with your father, her corporate credit cards, and all trust disbursements. Effectively, as of the moment you sign this, Harlan, she will not be able to buy a cup of coffee. Harlan picked up the heavy, old-fashioned telephone on his desk. He pressed a single button. Get me John Keller at Norcrest. A pause. I could hear the faint, tinny voice of his assistant on the other end. I don't care if it's Saturday, Harlan said, his voice dropping. Get him on the line. He waited, the receiver pressed to his ear, his gaze fixed on the ship painting. Marla laid the signature page in front of him. Keller, Harlan suddenly barked, making me jump. Harlan DuPont, I am invoking majority shareholder privilege. I require the unedited security footage from the 38th floor lobby, elevator bank C, and the P1 garage entrance from 2130 to 2200 last night. I want the raw digital files, the full metadata logs, and the SHA 256 checksums for each file to verify they are untampered. You will not send them to internal IT. You will deliver them, via secure courier, directly to the offices of Marla Keene. You have 90 minutes. He slammed the phone down without waiting for a reply. The silence that followed was absolute. Now the audio, Marla said, opening her laptop. My hands were shaking as I pulled up the file on my watch. The app was named Safe. The file was time-stamped, 9:46 p.m. I airdropped it to her computer. Marla put it into an audio editing program, not to alter it, but to view the waveform. She pressed play. First, my own voice, breathless. Vivian, I have a fiduciary duty. Then, the unmistakable sound of her voice a low hiss. You are a guest in this company. Then, a huge spike in the waveform, a sound so sharp and loud it made Marla wince. The keng. It was followed by my sharp, involuntary gasp, and then, Vivian's voice, clear as a bell. You will keep your mouth shut. Marla stopped the recording. She exported the file and saved it to a thumb drive, which she labeled and placed in an evidence bag. The checksum from Mr. Keller's video, paired with this audio, creates an undeniable multi-angle record of the event. The threat provides the motive for the assault, which was, in turn, a cover for the financial crimes. It's a perfect chain. The grandfather clock in the hall chimed. It was 9:12 a.m. Harlan DuPont picked up a heavy silver fountain pen from his desk. The cap squeaked as he unscrewed it. He spread the papers Marla had prepared, found the signature line, and signed his name. It was not a flowing, modern signature. It was a sharp, angular, almost violent piece of calligraphy. "It is done," he said. Marla was already scanning the signed document and attaching it to a series of pre-drafted emails. "Filing with J.P. Morgan, with Goldman, with the board of Amex, and with the Norcrest payroll department, the freeze order is effective, immediately." Her laptop chimed, a soft, polite ding of a sent email. A second ding, a reply. "Well," Marla said, a thin, cold smile touching her lips. "That was fast. J.P. Morgan's compliance department confirms receipt and execution. All accounts related to Vivian Mercer are now locked." It was over, or so I thought. I let out a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. The room seemed to tilt. "Sit down, Ava," Harlan said. I hadn't realized I was swaying. I gripped the back of a leather chair and sat. Harlan walked to the window, looking out at the grounds. "The quarterly board meeting for Norcrest Dynamics is at 2 o'clock this afternoon. It was scheduled last month. Vivian will be there. She will be presenting her glowing report as acting COO." He turned to face me. "She will not know about the freeze, not until her card is declined at the Starbucks in the lobby. She will walk into that meeting confused and angry. She will give her presentation, and then you will give yours." My blood ran cold. "Me? I'm not on the board. I'm a team lead." "You are my granddaughter," he said, as if that explained everything. "And you are the head of analytics. You will present your analysis, the analysis of vellum sourcing, the analysis of the fraud, and as part of your presentation on corporate security and risk, you will present the video of your assault." I was trembling, actually, physically shaking. The idea of standing in that room, in front of the board, in front of her. I can't," I whispered. Harlan's face, which had been cold, suddenly became granite. "You called me. You brought the evidence. You wanted this. Did you think signing a paper was the end? This is not how it ends. You don't freeze a snake. Ava, you cut its head off. In public." He walked over to me, looking down. "You will go home. You will shower. You will put on your best suit. You will put your hair back. You will not cover that bruise. You will wear it as a receipt. You will walk into that boardroom at 2:05 p.m. and you will present the data. Marla and I will be there as legal counsel for the trust." I looked at his unyielding face, and the tremor in my hands stopped. The fear was still there, but the cold, seismic rage from the elevator was returning. He was right. Freezing her money was just the opening salvo. I pushed myself to my feet. I stood as straight as he did. "Okay." A rare, almost imperceptible softening happened at the corners of his mouth. He nodded, satisfied. He turned back to the window, dismissing me. "Harlan?" He glanced over his shoulder. Why do you call them old cameras?" I asked, remembering his words from the phone last night. He tapped the glass of the window, pointing down at the city of Grayford, a smudge of steel and ambition on the horizon. "Because," he said, his voice a low growl, "these new people, like her, they live in their glass boxes. They think if no one in the room sees them, they are invisible. They forget that people like me built the foundations. We own the land. We laid the fiber optic cables. We still hold the deeds. They forget that the old, silent, patient cameras, the ones that see everything, never sleep. Vivian Mercer did not enter my family's life. She annexed it. She arrived 3 months after my mother's funeral, a whirlwind of calculated sympathy and laminated efficiency. My father, Richard Mercer, was a brilliant engineer, but a man hollowed out by grief, utterly lost in the administrative fog of running a multi-billion-dollar company. Vivian, whom he'd known vaguely from the industry, presented herself as a lifeline. She was the turnaround specialist who could handle the details while he grieved. He married her in less than a year. Her arrival at Norcrest Dynamics was staged as a corporate salvation. She didn't just take an office, she took command. She was all about forward momentum and breaking down old guard silos. She was sleek, polished, and always armed with the perfect corporate buzzword. My father, desperate for peace and a functioning company, handed her the reins as acting COO, and Vivian, in turn, began to build her mask. The mask was a masterpiece of public relations. Her first act was to approve the long-delayed budget for a new, state-of-the-art corporate gym. It was a brilliant, visible win. Employees who had been wary of the new wife were suddenly praising her commitment to wellness. Her second act was her crown jewel, the Norcrest Women in Biotech Fund. It was a mentorship and grant program designed to elevate female voices in the industry. It got her magazine covers in Grayford Business Quarterly. It got her speaking slots at leadership conferences. She became the public face of female empowerment at Norcrest, the executive who was lifting as she climbed. I watched this performance with a cold, growing dread. I saw the way she charmed the board, the way she flattered my father, the way her smile never, ever reached her eyes. The whispers started soon after. They were quiet, as they always are in a corporate environment. Rumors about vendor contracts, specifically, a new, massive contract for strategic consulting, awarded to a firm no one had ever heard of, Vellum Sourcing. The gossip in the analytics department was that the company was a ghost, and that its registered agent was Vivian's nephew. It was dismissed as petty jealousy. I didn't dismiss it. I'm a data analyst. I don't listen to rumors. I hunt for the data that supports them. I found it on a Tuesday, while running a routine quarterly audit of departmental spending. I wasn't even looking for it. I was just cleaning up code. But the numbers jumped out at me. A blatant anomaly in a sea of standard deviations. The budget for external consulting had ballooned by 17%, quarter over quarter. This, in itself, was odd. As Vivian was on a public crusade to trim the fat, I drilled down. The spike wasn't spread across multiple vendors. It was a single, massive black hole. 90% of the new spending was being funneled directly to Vellum Sourcing. I cross-referenced the invoices. They were laughably vague. Consulting services rendered. Project oversight. Strategic implementation. My job, as team lead, is to track deliverables against expenditures. I searched the internal servers. There were no deliverables, no reports, no strategy decks, no SOs, statements of work. There were no hours logged, no project files initiated. Norcrest Dynamics had paid Vellum Sourcing millions of dollars for nothing. I did my job. I sent a polite, professional email to accounts payable with a copy to the new temp CFO, Miles Rook, Vivian's son, installed in his position 3 weeks prior. My email was simple. Per my Q3 audit, please provide all SOWs and associated deliverables for vendor 881A, Vellum Sourcing, to reconcile against invoices paid. I didn't get an email back. Instead, within 10 minutes, a calendar invitation appeared. Mentoring coffee, Ava and Vivian. It was for the next morning. We met in the 15th floor cafeteria, a bright, open space with glass walls overlooking the city. It was her preferred territory. Public, visible, nowhere to hide. She arrived looking flawless, radiating warm, executive energy. She bought my coffee. Ava, she said, her voice a purr. I'm so glad you reached out. I love it when our junior talent takes initiative. You have your mother's eye for detail, you know. The casual mention of my dead mother was a small, sharp twist of a knife. I've been meaning to connect with you, she continued, stirring her own tea. You're smart, Ava, very smart, but you're naive. She leaned in, her smile becoming conspiratorial, the mentor sharing a secret with her protege. You're in analytics. You're paid to look at the numbers, but you're in a spreadsheet. I'm paid to see the whole chessboard. Some expenses in this business, they're soft. They're about relationships, not reports. Things that an analyst, if she's smart, knows not to poke. She took a sip of her tea, her eyes locked on mine over the rim of the cup. Your family, Ava. Don't make things difficult. Don't go digging in the mud. It's messy, and it stains. Just let it go. She framed it as advice, as a kindness, As a seasoned executive protecting a junior employee from political realities she didn't understand. I left that meeting with ice in my stomach. It wasn't advice. It was a warning, a threat, wrapped in the language of female empowerment she was so famous for. My mistake was that I didn't listen. My mistake was that I believed my job title, my name, and the truth were enough to protect me. I went back to my desk. I pulled up my previous email. I forwarded it, this time to a wider group, including the head of legal compliance. My addendum was cold, professional, and a direct challenge. Following up on the below, I am unable to close my Q3 audit without the requested SOWs and deliverables for vellum sourcing. Please advise. I hit send at 5:01 p.m. on Friday. 4 hours and 41 minutes later, I was in the glass elevator, and her bracelet was connecting with my face. The mentoring coffee was her first warning. The assault was her second. I knew, with chilling certainty, there would not be a third. The moment I got home, after the call with Harlan, I didn't just ice my face, I went to work. The violence didn't just wound me, it confirmed everything. She wouldn't have risked that, wouldn't have exposed her true self, for simple nepotism. This was bigger. She thought I was just an analyst. She forgot that analysts are detectives who use numbers instead of fingerprints. I bypassed the front-end accounting software. I used my senior-level credentials to access the raw SQL database on the back end. I wasn't just looking at the invoices anymore. I was tracing the wire transfers. The vellum sourcing bank account was, as I suspected, a doing business as DBA shell. It was registered to a man named Leo Rook. I ran a public records search. Leo Rook, 24. Last known address. An apartment in a different state. An apartment that, according to utility records, was co-signed by Vivian's sister, her nephew. The rumor was true. But I didn't stop there. An amateur would have stopped at nepotism. Vivian was no amateur. The money didn't stay in Leo Rook's account. It sat for exactly 48 banking hours, the minimum time to clear, and then it was transferred again, minus a small fee for Leo. The recipient? Rook Holdings, LLC. I pulled the incorporation papers for Rook Holdings. The sole proprietor, the only signatory, was listed clearly. Miles Rook, her son, my company's acting CFO. It was a classic laundering scheme, elegant in its simplicity. Vivian, as COO, approved the fraudulent invoices. The money went to her nephew, Leo, who acted as a cutout. Leo then transferred the clean money to Miles, who logged it as capital gains or investment returns in his personal holding company. She was using Norcrest Dynamics, my mother's legacy, as her personal ATM, stealing millions to enrich her own children. I worked through the night. The rage was a clean, cold fuel. I exported every transaction log, every wire transfer record, with the bank routing numbers. The server logs showing Miles Rook had been the one to approve the invoices in the system, overriding the standard AP checks. I pulled the incorporation papers for both Vellum Sourcing and Rook Holdings, LLC. I created a flowchart, a map of the theft, so simple a child could understand it. Vivian thought she could scare me. She thought a slap in a dark elevator would be the end of it. She operated on intimidation, on whispers, on the veiled mentoring threat. I operate on data. For every file, I created a digital signature and a checksum hash to prove it was untampered. I uploaded every last one of them, file by file, into the secure, encrypted, off-site digital vault my grandfather had set me up with years ago. She wanted to drag me into the mud. She didn't realize I'm the one who analyzes the soil composition. I am not going to defeat her with a rumor. I am not going to defeat her with a complaint to HR. I am going to walk into that boardroom with my bruised face, and I am going to end her, not with a story, but with a spreadsheet. My grandfather's command set the clock. I had until 2:00 p.m. The meeting with Harlan and Marla had frozen the assets. It was the financial decapitation, but Harlan was right. The snake was still thrashing. Vivian didn't know she was locked out yet. She would walk into that boardroom expecting a routine quarterly review. My job was to handle the corporate execution. Harlan had neutralized her wealth. I had to neutralize her power. I drove home from the mansion, the purple map on my cheek a throbbing reminder of the stakes. I had 4 hours, but the traps, the real, technical traps, had been set days ago. The assault in the elevator wasn't the beginning of the war. It was the desperate, sloppy end of a chess game Vivian didn't even know she was losing. My heist, the one I had been planning in the quiet hum of my workstation, began not with a spreadsheet, but with a lure. It happened 2 weeks ago, long before the mentoring coffee or the slap. I had the vellum sourcing invoices. I had the suspicion about Miles, but I had no proof of collusion. I had no evidence they were knowingly cooperating. I needed to build a digital bridge between them. So I built a trap. In the world of cybersecurity, they call it a canary, a document designed to sing when it's opened in the wrong place. I drafted a 2-page PDF. It looked perfectly boring. The title was Proposed Q3 Audit Reconciliation Process. It was dense with corporate jargon, subsections, and bullet points, the kind of document an executive like Vivian would only skim. But buried in the metadata, I had inserted a payload. I used a service to embed a single, transparent, 1x1 tracking pixel. To any normal user, it was invisible, but the moment that PDF was opened on any device, that tiny pixel would send a request to a server I controlled, logging the time, the device type, and most importantly, the IP address that had loaded it. I wrote a simple, bait-filled email. This was the heist moment, the digital equivalent of slipping the fake keycard to the guard. To Vivian. Mercer at Norcrest, com. Subject, urgent, Q3. Audit approval needed. Vivian, my apologies for the direct email. Per our conversation on efficiency, I've drafted a new reconciliation workflow for the external vendor audit. I believe this will save us significant time. However, I cannot proceed with the quarterly close until this new process is signed off by both the COO and the CFO. Could you please review and provide your approval by end of day, so we can stay on schedule for the external auditors? Best, Ava Mercer Analytics Team Lead. I hit send. The lure was in the water. The trap had 3 triggers. Urgent, created panic. External auditors, created fear. And approval by both the COO and the CFO forced her to forward it to her son, Miles Rook. I watched my tracking server log. Ping 1, 10:02 a.m., IP address 72.41.15, Norcrest Dynamics Corporate HQ, device, Apple iPhone, Vivian, she had opened it, probably in a meeting. Ping 2, 10:04 a.m., IP address 72.44.1.18, Norcrest Dynamics Corporate HQ, device, Windows Desktop, Miles Rook. She had forwarded it immediately. The internal collusion was confirmed. But I was hunting bigger game. I wasn't just proving nepotism. I was proving they were exfiltrating corporate data to the shell company. The hook in my email was a lie. I didn't need their approval for the audit. I needed them to panic and ask their co-conspirator, Vellum, if their tracks were covered. I waited. For 2 days, nothing. I thought the trap had failed. Then, at 11:17 p.m. on a Wednesday night, it came. Ping 3, 11:17:04 p.m., IP address 174.202.883, Comcast Cable Residential ISP Bridgeport, CT, device, Google Chrome on a MacBook Air. I ran a reverse lookup on the address. While I couldn't get a street name, I cross-referenced the Bridgeport, CT location with the public records I'd pulled. Leo Rook, Vivian's nephew and the registered agent for Vellum Sourcing, lived in Bridgeport. I had it. Vivian, in a panic about the external auditors, had forwarded my internal sensitive audit proposal to an unsecured, external email address, her nephew's. She had leaked company data to her co-conspirator. It was a fireable offense on its own. It was corporate espionage. I took a screenshot of the log. I saved the server data. I hashed the file. The next morning, the mentoring coffee invitation appeared. My trap had worked so well. It spooked her. She had delivered her smart but naive warning, the velvet glove. When I ignored that warning and kept sending my audit requests, she escalated. This time, not with coffee, but with a contract. On Thursday, the day before the assault, an automated email hit my inbox. Action required. Vivian Mercer has sent you a document to sign via Norcrest Legal Portal. I opened it. It was a one-page non-disclosure and confidentiality agreement. It was a standard-looking NDA, but the language was dangerously broad. It wasn't about protecting trade secrets. It was about enforcing silence. It bound the signer to refrain from discussing any and all sensitive financial matters, interdepartmental audits, or vendor relationships with any party, internal or external. It was a gag order. She was trying to legally muzzle me. She thought I was a naive 28-year-old she could terrify with a legal document. She was right that I was 28. She was wrong about the rest. This was her second mistake, and it was her biggest. I clicked Download Original. I did not sign the document in the portal. I opened the PDF in Adobe Acrobat Pro. I created a new blank page. I typed, Addendum A, Whistleblower Protections and State Law. 1. Notwithstanding any clause to the contrary in the preceding document, this agreement shall not be interpreted to prohibit the signee, Ava Mercer, from reporting any suspected illegal activity, financial malfeasance, corporate fraud, or acts of physical violence and workplace harassment, as protected under the Grayford State Whistleblower Protection Act, Statute 44A12. 2. This agreement explicitly permits the signee to cooperate fully with any internal corporate investigation or any external state or federal law enforcement agency regarding such matters. It was a legal carve-out, a torpedo I was building directly into her own weapon. It explicitly voided her entire NDA in the exact circumstances she was creating. I saved the modified file. It was now 2 pages long, not 1. I went back to the corporate signing portal. I declined the original. The system asked for a reason. I typed, re-uploading with minor clarification. I uploaded my new 2-page version. The portal registered it, scanned it, and then presented it back to me. I electronically signed my version. The system then automatically routed my signed 2-page document back to the originator, Vivian, for her counter-signature. This was the real gamble. Would she read it? Would she notice the page count had changed from 1 to 2? I was betting on her arrogance. I was betting that a COO who manages by intimidation doesn't read the fine print. She was a big-picture person. She was a bully. She would see that I had signed, assume I had capitulated, and hit approve on her phone, likely while walking between meetings. I waited for 6 agonizing hours. At 4:30 p.m., the email came. Fully executed. Your document, non-disclosure and confidentiality agreement, has been countersigned by Vivian Mercer. My heart hammered against my ribs. I opened the attachment. There it was. Page 1, the gag order. Page 2, my whistleblower addendum. And at the bottom of page 2, her sleek, digital, legally binding signature. Vivian Mercer had just countersigned a legal document that explicitly gave me permission to report her for fraud and violence. I had the data leak. I had the legal loophole. I had the financial evidence. The next day, Friday, I sent my final audit email, the one I referenced in Part 3, this time to the entire legal compliance department. Vivian, realizing her email trap had failed, realizing her NDA trap had failed, and panicking, found me in the elevator. She had run out of corporate weapons. All she had left was blunt force, and in that glass box, she gave me the final, irrefutable piece of evidence I needed, the acts of physical violence my addendum had specifically mentioned. Now it was Saturday, 1 p.m. The countdown was in its final hour. I sat at my home workstation. I opened the Norcrest Anonymous Whistleblower portal. It was a secure third-party service designed to protect employees. I began my final heist. I created a new report. Subject: Systemic financial fraud and executive assault by acting COO Vivian Mercer. I uploaded my evidence, one by one, each file digitally signed and hashed. Exhibit A: The financials, the complete analysis of the Vellum Sourcing and Rook Holdings LLC scheme, the wire transfer logs, the bank routing numbers, the flowchart of the theft. Exhibit B: The data exfiltration, the log from my tracking pixel, showing the IP address in Bridgeport. CT: the screenshot of the server log, the original PDF canary I had sent. Exhibit C: the failed gag order, the fully executed, countersigned 2-page NDA, including my whistleblower carve-out. Exhibit D: the audio file, the recording from my smartwatch, the Kang, the threat. You will keep your mouth shut. I did not upload the video. That I was saving. That was for the boardroom. I hit submit. A new ticket number flashed on the screen. Report 4472. My first ticket. 4471 had been for the video preservation. It was poetic. The traps were set. The legal documents were filed. The money was frozen. The digital evidence was logged in 2 separate systems. The clock on my wall read 1:30 p.m. I stood up. I walked to my closet and pulled out my best suit, a severe, dark charcoal wool. I put my hair back in a tight, unforgiving bun. I looked in the mirror. The bruise was a masterpiece of purple and black, a glaring, undeniable fact. Harlan's voice echoed in my head. Bring your self-respect. You will not cover that bruise. I wouldn't. It was my final exhibit. The countdown was over. It was time for the meeting. At 11:30 a.m., I was not at Norcrest Tower. I was on the 54th floor of a different, taller, more aggressive building of glass and steel. The discreet gold plaque in the lobby read, Keene, Strauss, and Ardell. This was Marla Keene's territory, and it was a strategic shift. We were no longer in Harlan's old-world study. We were in a sterile, high-tech legal war room, 30 stories above the city, preparing for the 2:00 p.m. assault. Harlan was already there, standing by the floor-to-ceiling window, looking down at the Norcrest building like a hawk surveying a distant nest. The conference room was cold, dominated by a massive black marble table and an 80-inch screen that was currently dark. At 11:45 a.m., Marla's assistant announced the arrival of John Keller, the head of security from Norcrest. Keller entered, carrying a gray impact-proof hard drive case. He was a broad, ex-military man who usually looked unflappable. Today, he looked like he was walking into his own court-martial. His eyes darted to me, settled on the dark, lurid bruise on my cheek, and then snapped immediately to the floor. He refused to look at me again. "Mr. DuPont, Mrs. Keene," he said, his voice a low, formal rumble. He placed the case on the marble table. "Mr. Keller," Marla said, all business. She did not invite him to sit. "Please confirm the chain of custody for the assets." Keller swallowed, then read stiffly from a printed memo in his hand. At 09:45 this morning, per the request from the majority shareholder's office, I personally pulled the raw video files from server cluster 4, corresponding to cameras elevator C internal, lobby main west, and AST doorbell 38. The files were isolated, encrypted, and transferred to this encrypted drive. No copies were made. No other personnel accessed the files. "And the verification?" Marla asked. Keller slid a single printed sheet across the table. "The SHA 256 checksums for all 3 source files. They are an exact match to the server-side logs. Time-stamped at 0946. The data is raw, complete, and untampered." "Thank you, Keller," Harlan said, his voice dismissive. "Your diligence is noted. That will be all." John Keller nodded, his relief palpable. He turned and left the room, leaving the gray case behind, a ticking bomb on the polished marble. "Good," Marla said, her voice sharp. "He's terrified. Terrified people follow procedures perfectly. He knows his job is on the line, and he has just provided us with a perfect, unimpeachable chain of evidence. She produced a key, unlocked the case, and pulled out a single, black hard drive. She slotted it into a high-end docking station connected to the massive screen. Let's review the prosecution's exhibits. The screen flickered to life, showing a file directory. Exhibit A, Marla said. The unnoticed angle. This is from the video doorbell on the accounting office suite, directly opposite elevator bank C. She clicked. The screen filled with a static, wide-angle shot. The color quality was consumer grade, slightly washed out. The timestamp in the corner read 9:47:12 p.m. We watched, in silence, as the ding of the elevator sounded faintly. The stainless steel doors of elevator C slid open. The camera's microphone, designed to pick up voices in a noisy hallway, was highly sensitive. The first thing we heard, before we even saw her, was Vivian's voice, spilling out of the elevator car, sharp and cold as ice. "Keep your mouth shut." Then, we saw the scene. I stumbled out first, my hand already covering my face. I looked dazed, my hair a mess. Vivian strode out a second later, perfectly composed, already smoothing the front of her cashmere coat. She glanced at me, huddled by the wall, with a look of pure contempt, before she turned and walked toward the main lobby. Marla paused the video. There it is, the threat, spoken aloud, in a public space, captured by a third-party camera. That is no longer an in-elevator dispute. That is a public, verifiable threat. She clicked the next file. Exhibit B, Lobby Main West. This is the high-definition pan-tilt-zoom camera covering the security desk. The angle was high, the image crisp and clear. We saw the scene we'd just discussed, but from a different angle. We saw me, moving away. We saw the guard, Peters, looking confused. We saw Vivian, her mask of concern snapping into place as she approached him. We saw her call after me. "Ava, darling, are you all right?" And then, we saw her turn back to Peters. She wasn't finished. She reached out, her smile still in place, and grabbed my upper arm, her fingers digging in, trying to physically steer me back. "Ava, don't be dramatic." The camera's microphone was far away, but it was aimed at the desk. My voice, low and shaking, was just audible. "You're hurting me." Marla paused it again, zooming in on Vivian's hand, her manicured fingers clenched like a claw on my jacket. "And there is the second assault, this one, in full view of lobby security. Any claim of an accidental fall is now void. She is actively, physically manipulating you against your will, on camera." My stomach was a cold knot. "And now," Marla said, her voice dropping, "Exhibit C, Elevator C internal." The screen went dark, then flashed to the familiar, sterile, black and white fisheye view from the elevator ceiling. The timestamp was in the corner, next to the small, red REC icon. The scene was silent. We watched the entire, ghostly pantomime, me, entering, Vivian, already there, her hand shooting out to hit the emergency stop. The red alarm light in the car began to pulse, casting silent, rhythmic shadows. We saw her step toward me. We saw her grab my hair. I gripped the arms of my chair, my knuckles white. We saw her arm draw back, bracelet glinting in the sterile light. We saw the brutal, efficient arc of the strike. We saw my head snap back with a violence that seemed impossible. We saw my body crumple, sliding down the glass wall into the corner. We watched her look down at me. We watched her, with no emotion at all. Press the button to resume the elevator's descent. I let out a breath, my hands shaking, but the fear was gone, replaced by something cold and hard. I was not the woman on the floor anymore. I was the one in the war room. I was not the victim. I was the one holding the tape. "The silent film is damning," Marla said, her voice soft but furious. "But it's incomplete." She opened a new window on her screen, a digital audio workstation. She imported the file from my smartwatch, the one labeled Safe 9:46 p.m. Wave. A jagged blue waveform appeared. "Ava, I've already run this through an authentication filter. The metadata is clean, time-stamped, geolocated to the Norcrest building, and no signs of editing. She then imported the silent elevator video into the same timeline. Now, she said, we create the masterpiece. We watched her, with the precision of a surgeon, align the audio and video. She found the visual frame of the impact, the millisecond her hand connected with my face. Then she found the audio file's loudest, sharpest spike, the sound the watch had recorded. The king! She dragged the audio file until the visual impact and the audio spike were perfectly, inextricably synced. Chain of custody is confirmed, she said. Let's play the final, undeniable cut. She hit the spacebar. The video played, this time with full, terrifying sound. Vivian's voice, from my watch. Stay out of the ledgers. Her hand grabbing my hair, visual. My whimper, audio. Vivian's voice. You will keep your mouth shut. The strike, visual. The kang, audio. A sound so sharp and loud, like a gunshot in the marble room, that it made me flinch. Even now, my choked gasp, audio. My collapse, visual. The visual of her smoothing her coat, paired with the faint sound of her breathing, calm and even. Marla stopped the playback. The silence in the room was absolute, heavier and more oppressive than before. Harlan, who had not moved, let out a long, slow sigh. It was a sound of immense, cold finality. That's enough, he said. He turned from the window. Marla, the physical copies. Sent, Marla said, closing the video file and opening her email. As a backup to the digital freeze order, fully notarized, hard copy suspension letters, citing Clause 14b, were delivered by courier to the General Counsel's office at J.P. Morgan, Goldman, and the brokerage firm at 10:30 a.m. The accounts are locked, and now the paper trail is cemented. They can't undo this without a court order, and they can't afford a lawyer to get one. The meeting, Harlan said. The agenda. Marla pulled up the Norcrest board meeting agenda on the main screen. 2 o'clock, standard review. Vivian presents her COO report at 2:30. Then, at 2:45, agenda item 5, workplace safety and HR compliance, to be chaired by Lorna Skye. Lorna, Harlan grunted. Good, she's pragmatic. She'll choose the company over Vivian in a heartbeat to mitigate liability. How do we present this? I asked, my voice still rough. I'm not on the board. I'm not even on the invite list. They won't let me pass the 42nd floor reception. A thin reptilian smile touched Harlan's lips. You are now. He picked up his cell phone from the table. He pressed a number from memory. Get me Lorna Skye, now. Lorna. Harlan DuPont. Good afternoon. I'm calling you as a courtesy to inform you that I and my personal counsel, Marla Keene, will be attending the 2:00 p.m. board meeting today. He paused, listening. Yes, in person. We are exercising the DuPont Trust's full voting rights. No, this is not about the quarterly dividend. He paused again, and his eyes met mine across the room. The cold, blue fire in them was terrifying. We are adding an urgent, non-negotiable presentation to your workplace safety agenda item. The presentation will be delivered by the head of analytics, Ava Mercer. No, Lorna. It cannot wait until next quarter. It involves a severe, immediate, and actionable liability to this company. A liability that, I assure you, you will want to get ahead of before the close of business today. Another pause. Excellent. Send the calendar update. We will see you at 2. He hung up. I looked down at my own laptop, which was open on the table. A second later, a ding chimed from my speakers. A new email appeared in my inbox. My screen glowed with the subject line. Calendar update. Urgent. Norcrest Dynamics. Quarterly board review. You have been added as a presenter. The invitation had been sent to the entire board of directors, to Lorna Skye, to the partners from the private equity firms, and to Vivian Mercer. Vivian, who was likely just arriving, perhaps fuming from a confusingly declined credit card at the lobby Starbucks, would have just seen my name, and Harlan's. The boardroom was no longer her stage. It was my arena. The 42nd floor of the Norcrest Tower was a soundproof tomb. The air was dry, refrigerated, and carried the bitter, burnt smell of coffee that had been brewing since 8 o'clock a.m. We were in the main boardroom, a cavern of dark mahogany, brushed steel, and a single, massive, polished black granite table that reflected the gray Grayford sky like a dark mirror. The members were already seated when I arrived at 1:55 p.m. Lorna Skye, the acting chairwoman, sat at the head of the table, her silver hair in a severe bun, her face a mask of neutral concern. To her left were the money. 2 men, one young and aggressive from a private equity firm, one older and more placid from the pension fund. Norcrest's general counsel, a man named Graves, sat to her right, his legal pads perfectly, ominously blank. And then, directly across the vast expanse of granite, was Vivian. She hadn't seen me yet. She was in a low, furious conversation on her phone, her thumb jabbing at the screen. She looked flustered. Her perfectly applied makeup couldn't hide the pale, pinched look of anger around her mouth. The call with her bank must have been unpleasant. Her corporate Amex, declined in front of the lobby barista. Her private checking, frozen. She was walking in blind. But she knew something was wrong. I took my seat at the far end of the table. My nameplate, Ava Mercer, Analytics, was stark white against the black stone. Beside me were 2 empty chairs, reserved for Harlan DuPont, DuPont Trust, and Marla Keene, counsel. At 2:02 p.m., Vivian snapped her phone shut and looked up, her eyes scanning the table. They landed on me. Her gaze was pure venom. She saw my suit. She saw my tight, unforgiving bun. And she saw the bruise, a galaxy of purple and black that I had deliberately left uncovered. She let out a short, sharp laugh, a sound like glass breaking. Well, she said, her voice carrying across the silent room. I see we're bringing family squabbles to the office. Lorna, I must have missed the agenda item for internal witch hunts. We have better things to do. Lorna Skye's expression didn't flicker. The agenda has been updated. Vivian, we will proceed as scheduled. Before Vivian could reply, the heavy mahogany doors at the end of the room swung open with a pneumatic hiss. Tap, tap, tap. The sound of my grandfather's cane on the marble floor of the reception area was the only sound in the world. Harlan DuPont entered, followed closely by Marla Keene. He was not a big man, but he filled the room. He wore his old gray wool suit, his back ramrod straight. He leaned on the silver-headed cane, but it looked more like a scepter than a crutch. In an instant, every person in that room, Lorna Skye, the fund managers, even the arrogant general counsel, was on their feet. It was an involuntary, primal reflex. The true power had entered the room. Harlan didn't acknowledge them. He walked slowly. Tap, 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 down the length of the table. He stopped at the chair beside me, placed his hand on my shoulder, a gesture of absolute, unyielding possession, and then sat. Marla sat on my other side. Only then did the rest of the board awkwardly, silently, take their seats. Vivian was as pale as marble. She was looking at Harlan, her facade of corporate confidence shattering. She had not expected this. Lorna, Harlan said, his voice a dry rasp that cut through the recycled air. Thank you for accommodating us. Let's begin. Ava. He nodded at me. My heart was a hummingbird in my chest. I could feel the blood pulsing in my bruised cheek. I stood. I walked on steady, practiced legs to the high-tech lectern at the front of the room. I opened my laptop. I pulled the simple, black USB drive from my pocket, the same one I had carried in this morning, and slotted it into the port. The 80-inch screen behind me flickered to life. My first slide was not a welcome. It was an indictment, in huge, 72-point, sans-serif font. Incident 4471 and financial irregularities. Analysis by Ava Mercer, confidential, for board review only. Good afternoon, I said. My voice was clear. It did not shake. My name is Ava Mercer, head of analytics. For the past 4 weeks, my team has been conducting a routine Q3 audit. That audit uncovered a series of significant, deliberate, and fraudulent financial activities. This presentation is my report. I clicked the remote. The irregularities center on a new vendor, Vellum Sourcing, onboarded in Q2. In the last quarter, Vellum has been paid $4.7 million for strategic consulting. I found 0 associated deliverables, statements of work, or project logs. These payments were fast-tracked, overriding standard AP protocols. Click. Here is the funds flow map. The $4.7 million was wired to a DBA account. Within 48 hours, 95% of those funds were transferred to a secondary entity, Rook Holdings, LLC. I heard a sharp intake of breath from Vivian's side of the table. Rook Holdings, LLC, I continued, my voice a cold monotone, is a domestic private holding company registered in this state. Its sole proprietor and signatory is acting CFO, Miles Rook. The room temperature dropped 10 degrees. The fund managers were no longer placid. They were leaning forward, their eyes narrowed. Miles Rook, sitting 2 seats down from his mother, had gone from pale to a slick, sickly gray. Click. This constitutes a classic, multi-level money laundering and embezzlement scheme, executed by the acting COO and the acting CFO. This is an outrage, Vivian exploded, her voice high and shrill. This is slander. She's a disgruntled employee. Quiet. Harlan's voice growled from the end of the table. He didn't raise his voice, but it silenced her like a slap. Let her finish. I looked back at the board. The fraud was the motive. The cover-up involved corporate espionage and, finally, violence. Click. Exhibit C, the Canary Trap. This is a server log showing that a sensitive internal audit proposal, a document I created as bait, was accessed from a residential IP address in Bridgeport, Connecticut. This address is the residence of Leo Rook, Vivian's nephew, the registered agent for the shell company, Vellum. Click. Exhibit D, the NDA. This is a non-disclosure agreement I was pressured to sign by Mrs. Mercer, and this, I highlighted the text, is Addendum A, the whistleblower carve-out I inserted, which Mrs. Mercer countersigned, legally voiding her own gag order. I paused. She thought I was naive. She was just arrogant. She didn't read the second page. The general counsel, Graves, was scribbling furiously. When her legal threats failed, I said, she escalated, which brings me to the final agenda item, workplace safety. Click. This is Exhibit E, Incident 4471. I pressed play. The silent, sterile, black and white fisheye view of the elevator car filled the 80-inch screen. The room was so quiet, I could hear the hum of the screen's capacitors. We watched the entire ghostly scene, the emergency stop, the hand grabbing my hair, my head snapping back. And then, Marla's perfectly synced audio file kicked in, my smartwatch audio, pumped through the theater-grade speakers in the boardroom. The kang. The sound was not just a sound, it was a physical blow. It was a metal-on-bone impact that echoed off the mahogany walls, a sickening, sharp crack that made the younger fund manager physically jolt in his cold leather chair. Lorna Skye's hand flew to her mouth, her eyes wide with genuine horror. We watched my body crumple. We heard, in the silence, Vivian's calm, even breathing. The video ended, plunging the screen to black. The silence that followed was absolute. It was a vacuum. A deepfake! Vivian shrieked, jumping to her feet so fast her chair screeched on the floor. That is a fabricated, deepfake video. She's an analyst. She faked it. This is libel. This is... Mr. Keller? Marla Keene's voice cut through the hysteria, cold as a scalpel. John Keller, the head of security, who had been standing by the door, stepped forward, He was holding a single, notarized document. He placed it in front of Lorna Skye. "Mr. Keller," Marla said, "please confirm the authenticity of the video file for the board." Keller, his eyes fixed on the table, recited his lines. "The file is a raw, unedited export from the Norcrest server. The chain of custody is unbroken. The SHA 256 checksum on the file presented matches the server-side original. It is authentic, ma'am." "Thank you. Mr. Keller," Marla said, "you may wait outside." Keller fled the room. Marla Keene stood up, holding a copy of the DuPont Trust. "For the record," she said, her voice projecting, "at 9:12 a.m. this morning, Acting Trustee Harlan DuPont invoked Clause 14B of the Family Governance Compact. This clause mandates an immediate unilateral freeze of all trust-held assets for any beneficiary or spouse engaging in acts of physical violence or financial malfeasance. As of this moment, Mrs. Mercer, you have no access to any DuPont-funded accounts." The blood drained from Vivian's face, the declined cards, the locked accounts. It all snapped into focus. This was an ambush. This was a coup. Lorna Skye, her face pale but her voice firm, turned to Vivian. The maternal concern was gone, replaced by the cold fury of a chairwoman facing a massive corporate liability. "Vivian," Lorna said, her voice dangerously quiet, "do you have anything to say in response to this evidence?" Vivian's eyes were wild. She looked at Harlan, who stared back, his face stone. She looked at Marla, a legal brick wall. She looked at me, the bruised analyst who had just destroyed her. She didn't answer Lorna. Her eyes darted down the table to her last, best hope, her accomplice, her son. "Miles," she pleaded, her voice suddenly small. "Miles, tell them what she's doing. Tell them it's a lie." Every eye in the room swiveled to Miles Rook, the temp CFO, the launderer. Miles was a puddle. He was sweating through his expensive suit. He couldn't look at his mother. He couldn't look at anyone. He was staring at the legal pad in front of him, which was now damp with his palm sweat. "Miles!" Vivian commanded. He flinched. He looked up, his eyes glassy with terror. He looked at Harlan, then at the general counsel. He knew. He was trapped. He mumbled. I just did what I was told." He looked at his mother, his expression a pathetic mix of terror and betrayal. "I just followed your orders, Mom." It was done, a confession, in front of the entire board. Vivian stumbled back, as if he had physically struck her. The fund managers were already on their phones, no doubt texting their partners to short Norcrest stock. The general counsel was writing, his pen flying, a prelude to the lawsuits. I stepped back to the lectern. I calmly ejected the USB drive and slid it back into my pocket. I looked, for the first time, directly at the woman who had hit me. Her mask of the perfect female leader was gone, leaving only the greedy, violent, and now terrified woman beneath. "I reported this, Vivian," I said, my voice quiet, but it carried in the dead, silent room. "Not because you are my stepmother, but because you are the COO. I did this because this is my place of work, not your family." The confession hung in the air, a fatal, unretractable admission. "I just followed your orders, Mom." Miles Rook's words sucked the last bit of oxygen from the room. Vivian stared at her son, her face a mask of disbelief, as if he had just stabbed her in the back, but the betrayal was secondary to the new, cold, immediate reality. She was exposed. She turned her wild-eyed gaze back to Harlan. "This is coercion. You've poisoned them against me." She was cornered, and the lashing out was just beginning. She grabbed her phone from the black granite table, her thumb mashing the screen. "I'm calling my lawyer. I'm calling your father. Ava, She stopped. Her thumb froze. Her eyes locked on the screen of her phone, which was not dialing, but receiving. It lit up, a cascade of notifications, one after the other, a digital avalanche. BZZT. A red banner alert from her private bank. Transaction declined. Insufficient funds. Refresh 4A98T. BZZT. An email notification from her brokerage. Subject: urgent. Account action required. Trading privileges temporarily suspended. BZZT. BZZT. A text message from a number she clearly recognized. Her broker. Vivian. Call me. The trustee issued a full freeze. I've never seen anything like this. My hands are tied. Don't trade. The blood drained from her face. It was one thing to hear Marla say the words. It was another to see the digital walls of her life slam shut in real time. The declined card at Starbucks hadn't been a glitch. It was the first shot. This was the full-scale bombardment. She looked up from the phone, her hand shaking so badly she almost dropped it. Her eyes, wide with a new, specific terror, found Harlan at the end of the table. You, she whispered, her voice a dry rattle. My private accounts, my personal brokerage, my Amex. Harlan, you wouldn't dare. Harlan DuPont, who had been watching this unfold with the placid interest of a man watching the weather, did not move. He didn't raise his voice. He simply stated a fact, cold as the marble between them. Dare? It's done. Vivian, it was signed at 9:12 this morning. Clause 14B. You are, as of that moment, a financial ghost. That's not possible. That's... Madam Chair. Marla Keene's voice cut through Vivian's panic, addressing Lorna Skye. The trustee has acted. The family has cleaned its house. Now, the corporation must clean its own. Lorna Skye, who had been watching this with the grim focus of a surgeon, snapped into action. This was no longer a drama. It was a crisis, and she was in command. Mr. Graves, she said to the general counsel, the resolution, now. Graves, who had clearly anticipated this, slid a single, pre-drafted document from his leather portfolio. Lorna didn't hesitate. She took a heavy gold fountain pen from her jacket, uncapped it, and signed her name with a sharp, angry slash at the bottom. She passed it to the PE fund manager. He signed. She passed it to the pension fund manager. He signed. A rapid, silent, brutal execution. Lorna Skye held the paper up. Resolution 42A, she announced, her voice ringing with grim authority. The Board of Directors of Norcrest Dynamics hereby places acting COO Vivian Mercer on immediate, indefinite, and unpaid administrative leave, pending the results of a full forensic audit and criminal investigation. She then turned her gaze to Miles, who looked like he was about to be physically ill. An acting CFO Miles Rook is terminated, for cause, effective immediately. You can't, Vivian shrieked. This is a kangaroo court. I have a contract. Lorna ignored her. She picked up the heavy black conference phone in the center of the table and pressed a single button. Security, send a team to the 42nd floor boardroom, immediately. She disconnected and then looked at Graves. Mr. Graves, revocations, now, while we are in this room. Graves was already on his laptop, his fingers flying. This, I knew, was the real execution. This was the digital beheading. Revoking administrator-level credentials for user V. Mercer, Graves recited in a low monotone, like a priest giving last rites. Forcing password reset, disabling ERP and database access, disabling remote network access, deauthorizing corporate credit cards, disabling building access keycard, credentials revoked. He typed another command. Revoking all credentials for M. Rook, credentials revoked. It took less than 30 seconds. In the time it took to draw a breath, Vivian and Miles had been digitally erased from the company they had been looting. While Graves was typing, Marla Keene leaned toward me, her voice a low murmur only I could hear. Now, Ava, file it. I opened my own laptop. I pulled up the whistleblower report I had filed that morning. I clicked Addendum. I attached the notarized statement from John Keller regarding the video's authenticity and a formal request for protected status under the Grayford State Whistleblower Protection Act, citing the countersigned NDA and the physical assault in the elevator. I addressed it directly to Lorna Skye and Mr. Graves, and I hit send. A moment later, Lorna's laptop chimed. She read the notification. She looked at Graves. Mr. Graves, Lorna said, her voice firm. You will also note for the record that Ms. Ava Mercer's formal request for whistleblower protection has been received. Given the extraordinary evidence presented today, her request is hereby approved, effective immediately. You will personally ensure that there is zero retaliation against her or any member of her team. Is that crystal clear? Crystal, Madam Chair, Graves muttered, already typing the confirmation. I was safe. I was untouchable. The PE fund manager, the younger one, finally spoke. He had been furiously texting, his face pale. This is a catastrophe, a complete leadership vacuum, Lorna. We need an interim CEO, now, someone from the outside, a neutral, third-party crisis manager. My partners will insist. A sound, like dry leaves scraping stone, came from the end of the table. Harlan was scoffing. Nonsense, he said, his voice cutting across the room. You don't need an outsider to manage a problem that has already been solved. This wasn't a systemic failure. This was a parasite, and it has been removed. He gestured, not with his cane, but with his hand, directly at me. You have your acting COO right here, Ava Mercer. The room went silent again. The PE guy looked at me, at my bruise, at my analytics nameplate, utterly stunned. Her? Harlan? With all due respect. She's a team lead. We need a seasoned, C-suite executive to calm the market. You need the person who found this. Harlan cut him off, his voice like steel. You need the person who built the trap, who read the law, and who had the courage to bring the evidence to this room. She knows the books better than any of you. She has the integrity Vivian lacked. The market doesn't need to be calmed. It needs to be assured. The board will approve Ava Mercer as acting COO, effective immediately. It was not a suggestion. It was a command from the man who owned more of the company than all of them combined. All eyes turned to me, the bruised analyst, the sudden queen. My heart was hammering, a frantic bird against my ribs. I stood up, my legs feeling strangely steady. I wasn't just shaking anymore. I was vibrating with the adrenaline of it all. Thank you, Harlan, I said, my voice clear. But I'm not interested in the title. Harlan's eyebrow raised a fraction of an inch. This he had not anticipated. I turned my gaze to Lorna Skye. Before we discuss any appointments, we discuss remediation. Vivian didn't just steal money. She was a predator. She threatened, she harassed, and she bullied other employees. I know this because I'm not the only one she's hurt. I was thinking of the receptionist, the one with the accidental bruise. I was thinking of the hushed whispers in the hallways for the last year. I will not accept any position, I said, my voice ringing with an authority I didn't know I possessed, until this board authorizes a full, independent, external review of every HR complaint filed against Mrs. Mercer and Mr. Rook for the last 18 months, and a compensation fund must be established for the known victims of her harassment. This wasn't just revenge anymore. This was a cleansing. Lorna Skye looked at me, and for the first time, a flicker of a smile touched her lips. It was a smile of pure, cold respect. She wasn't looking at a victim. She was looking at a leader. Done, Lorna said, without hesitation. The company's liability is paramount. Mr. Graves, add it to the resolution, a full external HR audit, and a remediation fund. We'll cap it at $2 million, pending review. She looked back at me. Get me the list of names by tomorrow. I'll have it for you by 5 o'clock today, I said. You bitch! Vivian's shriek, a primal, guttural sound of pure hatred, cut through the corporate speak. Her mask of composure was gone, burned away. You planned this, all of you. This is my company, She slammed her hands on the table, a furious, childish tantrum. At that exact moment, the heavy mahogany doors hissed open. Two uniformed security guards, not the hesitant Peters, but the serious, ex-cop internal guards, their faces impassive, stepped inside. They stood, hands clasped, by the door. Lorna nodded at them. "Please escort Mrs. Mercer and Mr. Rook from the premises. They are not to touch any company property. Their personal effects will be mailed to them." Vivian looked at the guards, at Lorna, at me. Her face was a mottled, ugly mask of red and white. "I'll sue you! I'll sue all of you! You haven't heard the last of—" She grabbed her expensive leather portfolio and her phone from the table and stormed toward the door. She still thought she could command the space. She reached the exit and, out of pure, arrogant habit, she swiped her corporate ID badge at the security panel to leave. The light on the panel didn't turn green. It flashed red. A low, mocking, electronic beep-boop-beep echoed in the silent, mahogany-walled room. Her access was gone. Vivian froze, her hand still on the reader. That small, electronic rejection was the final, deepest humiliation. It was more profound than the video, more absolute than the frozen accounts. It was the digital declaration that she, Vivian Mercer, was no longer allowed to open her own door. She was, officially, an outsider. She turned back, her mouth open, but no sound came out. One of the guards stepped forward, his face impassive, and calmly, firmly, pressed the push-to-exit button on the inside of the wall. The glass doors hissed open. The guards waited. Vivian Mercer, the woman who had ruled the 42nd floor, stared into the hallway as if it were an abyss. Then, without another word, she walked out. Miles Rook, crying silently, his face in his hands, shuffled out behind her like a child. The doors closed, sealing the tomb. The heavy mahogany doors clicked shut, sealing the room. The beep-boop-beep of the failed access card echoed in the funereal silence. Vivian was gone. Miles was gone. For a full 10 seconds, the only sound in the 42nd floor boardroom was the faint hiss of the HVAC system. The board members, Lorna, the fund managers, the general counsel, sat frozen, as if recovering from a bomb blast. I remained standing by the lectern, my hands flat on the cool wood. My heart was still a frantic drum, but the battle was over. This was the aftermath. The general counsel, Graves, was the first to move. He had been typing furiously on his laptop since the moment Lorna gave the order to revoke credentials. He hadn't been writing memos. He had been dispatching his hounds. "Madam Chair," Graves said, his voice low and stunned, his eyes glued to an incoming instant message from his forensic IT director. It's worse than we thought." Lorna looked at him, her face grim. "Go on, Mr. Graves." "My team they're in the temp CFO's workstation right now. Miles Rook. He tried to delete his email archives. He initiated a full wipe just before he was called into this meeting." The PE manager swore under his breath. "But he's an amateur," Graves continued, a note of cold, professional disdain in his voice. "He didn't know about the backup server. He didn't know about the shadow logs. My team is pulling them now. The Vellum sourcing invoices. They're just the beginning." This was the first rivet. I had provided the map. Now, they were unearthing the bodies. "They've already found the core directory," Graves said, reading from his screen. "We have the original incorporation papers for Vellum sourcing. My team just ran the beneficial ownership check. The sole owner is, as Ms. Mercer stated, Leo Rook, Vivian's nephew. It's confirmed." Lorna nodded, her lips a thin white line. "We have the fraud. What else?" "We have the conspiracy," Graves said. His laptop chimed. "And we have the malice. An email. Sent 2 weeks ago from Vivian Mercer's personal, encrypted Proton Mail account to Miles Rook's personal Gmail." He looked up, his face pale. "The subject line is, 'Our Ava problem.' The body of the email is one sentence." He took a breath. We need to make the Ava problem disappear. Handle it. The room went colder. The mentoring coffee, the NDA, the assault. It was all a premeditated, escalating campaign, now with a digital paper trail. Handle it, a command that, in this context, was chillingly sinister. As if summoned by the word problem, Lorna Skye's own laptop chimed with a new email notification. She glanced at it. Her eyes widened, and she stiffened. "My God," she whispered. She turned her laptop screen so the general counsel could see it. "Who is it from?" the pension fund manager asked, leaning in. It's from the front desk receptionist, on the 38th floor," Lorna said, her voice shaking with a new, cold fury. She must have heard that Vivian was removed. "She just sent this to me, to HR, and to Ms. Mercer." My own laptop chimed. I opened the email. Subject, "My accident. Confidential HR complaint." The email was from a young woman named Sarah. "I know this is sudden, but I heard that Mrs. Mercer is gone. I can't stay silent. 3 months ago, Mrs. Mercer called me incompetent for misdirecting a call. She grabbed my arm in the stairwell and shoved me against the wall. I told HR I walked into a doorframe. I was too scared to say anything else. She told me she'd ruin me." Attached to the email was a photograph, a time-stamped, dated selfie, taken in a bathroom mirror, a dark, ugly, purple-black constellation of a bruise on an upper arm, a bruise that looked chillingly, sickeningly familiar. The remediation fund I had demanded wasn't just a negotiating tactic, it was a necessity. This woman was my first name on that list. Chime. Another email, this time. It was the older pension fund manager's laptop. He read it, his placid face turning to granite. "This is from a senior clerk in accounts payable," he said, his voice a low growl. "He's been there for 30 years. He says he's been uncomfortable for months. He's attaching invoices from Vivian's Women in Biotech Fund." My mask section flashed through my mind. The charity, her PR crown jewel. "The invoices," the manager read, "are for event planning and speaker fees for the fund, but the payment routing numbers, they don't go to a corporate account. They don't go to a charity. They go to a private, personal checking account at a community bank." "Let me guess," Marla Keene said, her voice dry. "The account name?" The manager nodded. "The account name is Vivian Rook, her maiden name. She wasn't just stealing from the company. She was stealing from her own, highly publicized, flagship charity. She was redirecting donation money, meant for other women, directly into her own pocket. The room was no longer just a boardroom. It was a crime scene. The secrets were popping out like rivets from a hull under catastrophic pressure. Lorna Skye finally let out a long, heavy breath. The immediate shock was over. The cold, hard reality of the cleanup was setting in. She looked at me, her gaze no longer one of surprise, but of desperate, pragmatic need. "Ms. Mercer, Ava," she said, her voice exhausted. "You found this. You mapped it. You understood the full scope of this before any of us." She gestured to the mountain of new evidence piling up on their screens. "You knew this wasn't just vellum. You knew it was a pattern. When you demanded that remediation fund, you already knew about Sarah." "I knew there was a Sarah," I corrected. "I didn't know her name until now." "You came in here with more than just a problem," Lorna stated. "Don't tell me you didn't bring a solution. You've been planning this. What's your plan to fix it?" She was right. I hadn't come in just to burn it all down. I had come to rebuild. I picked up my remote and clicked to the next slide. The last one. Recovery and Stabilization Roadmap, 30 to 60 to 90. "I do," I said. "This is the 30, 60, and 90-day plan." For the next 5 minutes, I laid it out. Phase 1, 30 days. Containment and transparency. We hire an independent, Big Four forensic accounting firm. Not our usual auditors. A new one. They report directly to this board. We self-report the fraud to the SEC before the market opens on Monday to control the narrative. We announce the leadership change, my interim appointment, and the external audit. We communicate to all staff, assuring them of the whistleblower protections and the new HR remediation channel, and we secure the shadow logs immediately. Phase 2. 60 days, remediation. The audit identifies every dollar stolen. We begin legal proceedings to claw back every cent from Rook Holdings and any other shell we find. We process the HR claims and pay the victims from the fund. Phase 3. 90 days, reform. We implement new, triple-signature AP controls. We replace the acting leadership in HR and finance with permanent, external hires. We rebuild the trust. By the end of Q1, Norcrest is stronger, more transparent, and more profitable. I finished. The plan was aggressive, but it was total. It was not a Band-Aid. It was surgery. The room was silent. A slow, dry scraping sound came from my left. My grandfather. He was leaning forward, his old, bony hands clasped on his cane. A smile, not a warm one, but one of deep, profound, cold satisfaction, was spreading across his face. It was the first time I had ever seen him smile like that. "You see, Lorna," Harlan said, his voice a low, proud growl. "I told you, she didn't just survive the shipwreck." He looked at me, his icy blue eyes holding mine. "She redesigned the damn ship." Lorna Skye stared at me, a long, assessing gaze. Then she nodded, a sharp, decisive dip of her chin. "Mr. Graves, the final resolution, now." "Madam Chair?" "Vivian Mercer," Lorna said, her voice ringing with finality. "She is still, technically, married to the son of the founder. She is, by marriage, in the line of governance and succession for the DuPont Trust's oversight of this company. I want that link severed, permanently. I want a vote." Marla Keene spoke. "I have it here. A resolution to formally remove Vivian Mercer from any and all current and future governance succession lists for Norcrest Dynamics, citing gross misconduct under Clause 14B. "I second it," the pension manager said. "All in favor?" Lorna said. A chorus of "I" filled the room. "Motion carries, unanimously," Lorna said. "She is, for all legal and corporate purposes, erased." It was the final nail. The money was gone. The job was gone. The power was gone. And now, her very name was gone from the company's future. As if she could feel it, a sound erupted from the hallway, muffled but distinct through the heavy, soundproof doors. It was a shriek, a wild, furious, incoherent sound of pure rage. Then, a final, bellowing shout, clear enough for all of us to hear, her last pathetic echo. "You'll regret this, all of you! You will regret this!" The sound faded as the security guards presumably forced her into the elevator. In the boardroom, no one moved. No one flinched. No one responded. We just sat there, in the cold, quiet room, listening to the silence she had left behind. At 3:45 p.m., an email was sent to every employee at Norcrest Dynamics, from the mailroom to the analysts. Subject: urgent, all-hands company meeting, 4:00 p.m., main auditorium. This was not a standard quarterly review. This was a drop-everything summons. The main auditorium on the 10th floor was a vast, theater-style room designed to hold 500 people. As the employees filed in, they were met not with the usual welcome slide, but with a stark, simple message projected onto the massive 30-foot screen. Safety is everyone's responsibility. The room was a sea of murmuring. The rumor mill had been churning for the last hour, ever since Vivian and Miles had been seen, white-faced and silent, being escorted by security into the service elevator. People had seen them. People had seen their access badges collected, but they didn't know why. They were scared. A leadership purge meant instability, layoffs, chaos. The air was thick with anxiety, a low, electric hum of corporate fear. At 4 p.m. on the dot, The lights in the auditorium dimmed. The murmuring faded, replaced by a tense, expectant hush. A single spotlight hit the podium on the stage. I walked out of the wings, alone. I walked to the podium. I could hear the collective, sharp intake of breath from the first 50 rows. I heard the whispers, my face, the bruise, which had ripened into a dark, undeniable map of violence, was lit by the spotlight for all to see. It was not covered. It was not hidden. It was my credential. I placed my hands on the lectern to stop them from shaking. I looked out at the sea of faces. People I worked with, people I mentored, people who had been terrified of Vivian for over a year. "Good afternoon," I said. My voice, amplified by the microphone, was steady, clear, and cold. It filled the entire space. "My name is Ava Mercer. Many of you know me as the head of analytics. Some of you know me as Richard Mercer's daughter, but I'm not here today as a daughter." I paused, letting the words land. I looked directly into the darkness where the faces were. "I am here as an employee of this company, just like you. For the past 18 months, a shadow has fallen over this company. We have been told to accept a new culture, a culture of fear, of intimidation, of looking the other way. We have been told that some people are untouchable. We have been told to be silent." I leaned forward. "That culture ends today." What happened to my face was not a family squabble. It was not a personal dispute. It was an act of workplace violence, committed by a superior to silence an employee who was investigating a crime. This is not a family story. This is a workplace principle. And the principle is this: no one is untouchable. I clicked the remote in my hand. "This is the evidence." The massive 30-foot screen behind me lit up, not with a spreadsheet, not with a graph, but with the stark, black and white, fisheye view of the elevator car. The entire auditorium watched, in dead, horrified silence, the ghostly pantomime of the assault. They saw the emergency stop. They saw the hand in my hair. They saw my head snap back. And then, the audio from my watch, synced by Marla, blasted through the theater-grade speakers. The king. It was not a sound. It was a physical shockwave. It was a metal-on-bone impact that echoed from the walls. A sickening, sharp crack that made 500 people flinch as one. I heard women gasp. I heard men swear under their breath. The nervous, gossipy murmuring of the room was gone, replaced by a single, unified, profound silence, a silence of pure, cold horror. The clip played to the end, my body, crumpled in the corner, Vivian, smoothing her coat. The screen went black. The silence that followed was heavier than any I had ever felt. It was a solid, leaden thing. 500 people, completely, utterly still. I let the black screen hang there for 10 full seconds. "The employee who did this," I said, my voice cutting into the dark, "was our acting chief operating officer, Vivian Mercer. She did this to stop me from reporting that she and acting CFO Miles Rook were embezzling millions of dollars from this company, from our company." I stepped back from the podium. The board has reviewed this evidence and the forensic data, and now, Chairwoman Lorna Skye will inform you of their decision. I walked to the side of the stage as Lorna, a pillar of gray, severe authority, walked to the podium. Lorna did not waste words. "Effective at 2:45 p.m. today, the Board of Directors has unanimously voted to terminate Vivian Mercer and Miles Rook for cause. Their actions are a profound betrayal of this company and every one of you. They will be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law." She paused. "We have also approved a full, independent, external forensic audit of the entire executive ledger, going back 24 months. The results will be made public to you." The room was still silent. This wasn't a victory. This was an exorcism. It was a shock. I stepped forward again, back into the light. "Today, we are announcing a new, fully funded whistleblower protection program. It will be managed by an external law firm. It is 100% anonymous. If you have seen something, if you have been threatened, if you have been harassed, you will be protected. Your protection is my first priority. I looked at the front row, where I knew the receptionist, Sarah, was sitting. We are also establishing a fully funded HR remediation and compensation fund. Anyone who has been a victim of harassment, verbal or physical, by any member of the executive team will have access to free, independent legal counsel, paid for by this company, and you will be compensated. Your voices will be heard. This was the moment the fear was supposed to break, the moment the applause was supposed to come. But it didn't. The silence held. It wasn't a fearful silence anymore. It was a heavy, steel-like silence. The silence of people who have been holding their breath for a year and have not yet processed what it means to exhale. The silence of shock and of a slow, dawning, terrified hope. Then, a new sound. Tap, tap, tap. My grandfather, Harlan DuPont, walked onto the stage from the other wing. He didn't go to the podium. He just walked to the center, his old, frail frame belying the absolute power he commanded. He stood next to me. He looked out at the 500 employees. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need the microphone. My family built this company on one principle, he said, his old, gravelly voice carrying in the dead still air. He put his hand on my shoulder, the same gesture he had used in the boardroom. His grip was like iron. Respect, he said. Respect is not negotiable. He nodded once to the crowd. Then he turned. Tap, 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 and walked off the stage. That was it. Lorna Skye walked back to the podium. This meeting is adjourned. We will have a new roadmap for you by Monday morning. Thank you. The lights in the auditorium came up. And still, no one moved. 500 people sat in their seats, stunned. They were looking at the stage. They were looking at me, at my bruise, at the black, empty screen where the ghost of Vivian Mercer had just been executed. There was no applause. There was no cheering. There was no celebration. There was just the heavy, profound, stunned silence of a ship that had just survived a catastrophic storm, the silence of people realizing they were, finally, safe. I stood there for a moment, looking at them. I looked at the sea of faces, no longer afraid, just still. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel joy. I didn't feel the sharp, hot rush of revenge. I just felt my lungs fill with air. I could breathe. The weight was gone. It was over. And in the silence, from the speakers all over the building, a loud, electric tone rang out. Brrr. The 5 p.m. bell, the end of the workday. It cut through the stillness, sharp and final. It wasn't a bell. It was a gavel. The trial was over. The verdict was in. I turned and walked off the stage. The 5 p.m. bell was a gavel. The auditorium emptied, not with the usual rush of a Friday, but with a slow, dazed, quiet shuffling. The employees filed out, avoiding eye contact. But the fear was gone. They just looked, numb. Lorna Skye, Harlan, Marla, and I did not stay on the stage. Lorna gestured to a small, glass-walled conference room just off the auditorium. The air inside was still and cold. Lorna sat, the picture of exhausted, pragmatic control. She slid a single, freshly printed document across the table. It stopped in front of me. The title was blunt. Interim appointment. Acting Chief Operating Officer. The board ratified Harlan's motion via secure text the moment you started your 90-day plan, Lorna said. It's official. It just needs your signature. I looked at the line at the bottom, my name. Before I could reach for my own pen, Harlan placed his on the document. It was a heavy, sterling silver fountain pen, its surface a fine web of scratches and history. It was the same pen he had used to sign the freeze order that morning. This isn't a gift, Ava, he said, his voice quiet. For my ears only. It's a burden. You don't sign this for me. You don't sign it for your mother's memory. You sign it for the company, or you don't sign it at all. I picked up the pen. It was heavier than it looked. I uncapped it. I signed Ava Mercer on the line. The ink was a dark, severe black. I capped the pen. It made a small, solid, final click. The sound of a lock engaging. I reached into my suit pocket and pulled out the black USB drive. The one that held the video, the audio, the financials, the entire war. Marla Keene, ever prepared, had a heavy bubble-padded evidence envelope on the table. I slid the USB drive into the envelope and pressed the adhesive strip down. Sealing it shut, I pushed it across the table to her. "The corporate evidence is for the external audit. Marla," I said. "This," I tapped the sealed envelope, "is for the district attorney. This isn't just a firing. It's a criminal referral, for felony embezzlement, and for assault." Marla took the envelope. "He's expecting my call. He'll have it within the hour." My laptop, still open on the table, chimed with a soft, polite notification. It was a secure channel message from Marla's paralegal, who had been monitoring the financial front. 1715 ET. All legal challenges to Clause 14B by Mercer-affiliated accounts have been denied by Bank General Counsel. Freeze order is confirmed and will remain locked indefinitely pending criminal investigation. Assets secure. She was, and would remain, a ghost. I turned to my laptop. I had new credentials. My access already elevated to the 42nd floor. I opened my email. I started a new message to the head of Human Resources, the terrified, complicit man who was, as of this afternoon, also on administrative leave. His interim replacement was already CC'd. Subject: Action. Remediation Fund. First priority. Body: Please begin processing the claim for Sarah Jenkins. Reception, 38th floor. She is the first priority for the compensation fund approved by the board. You will ensure she has independent legal counsel by tomorrow morning. I will be monitoring this personally. I hit send. The click of the key felt as final as the pen. I closed the laptop. The meeting, the day, the war, was over. Lorna and Marla were gathering their papers, their voices a low murmur of legal next steps. Harlan was slowly pushing himself to his feet, leaning on his cane. I stood and walked to the glass wall of the small conference room. Outside, the massive 10th floor lobby was empty, steeped in the blue light of the coming evening. Beyond the larger atrium windows, the Grayford sky, which had been a flat, oppressive gray all day, had finally broken. A fine, cold rain was streaking down the glass, blurring the new city lights into watercolor. I saw my reflection, the severe suit, the tight bun, and the dark, purple-black map on my cheek. As I watched, a single, heavy drop of rain ran down the outside of the window, perfectly bisecting my reflection. It ran over the dark mark on my cheek, a clean, cold line of water. For a moment, it looked like the bruise was dissolving, washing away in the rain. I didn't think about Vivian. I didn't say her name. I didn't offer a word of thanks for the lesson. I didn't say goodbye to her legacy. She was simply gone, erased. Harlan was waiting by the door. Ava. Just my name. It was all that was needed. I turned from the glass. I picked up my briefcase. I walked out of the conference room, leaving Lorna and Marla to begin rebuilding the company I now led. Harlan and I walked alone across the vast, empty lobby. The heavy glass door of the conference room swung shut behind me. It didn't slam. It didn't echo. It closed with a soft, expensive, pneumatic thud. It was solid. It was finished. And in the empty, carpeted silence, it left no echo at all. Thank you so much for listening to this story. I'd love to know where you're listening from. So drop a comment below and let's connect and share your thoughts. Please be sure to subscribe, like the video, and give us a huge boost by hitting that hype button, so this story can be heard by many more.